Well, death is so weird. To me, at least. I want to preface everything with a disclaimer that my perspective is probably not the perspective of many, but my situation is not even necessarily unique, but the way I handled my situation may vary. So, take everything I say with a grain of salt, to be honest. If it don't apply, let it fly. Um, but death to me is simply matter of fact. Like, and I'm not saying that, like, obviously, death is a fact of life and unavoidable. And I don't I say that without the emotion behind it. Because often death is something that we all know as human beings as inevitable. You can't avoid it. It's, how you get to the end. And yet there's a lot of valid fear and anxiety around death and how you die and, all those things, which is part of the human experience. Death is not something that I fear anymore. And that's for multiple reasons. And it, again, take everything I say with a grain of salt. This may come off as very morbid. But I don't say this to be all deep and philosophical or anything. I am just genuinely expressing my thoughts and views at this point. And one of the many reasons I don't fear death is because I've had the experience of wishing it would happen. At one point in my life, I was suicidal. I learned in therapy that suicide ideation is a spectrum. And I was what was considered passively suicidal, meaning I never took action to make certain things happen. There were never attempts. There was never manifested, self-harm. There was none of those things. But mentally, we were in the trenches. And that time period was after my assault. And logically, personally, I think that just makes sense when you've experienced something so horrifically devastating that it would just kind of be like, you know what? I kind of don't want to do this anymore. But I've healed, clearly, or I wouldn't be talking about it. That's what this tattoo is for. If you're not familiar with semicolons are representative for, you could have stopped what you kept going because semicolons connect sentences. And for me, I added a cross to it because for me, particularly, it wasn't just that I chose to keep going. It's that God kept me going. He is the reason that I'm alive and I'm talking today. And so I don't think it's something that's ever really talked about at least among people who have had mental health issues or various experiences, probably because of all the stigma and really not feeling comfortable sharing a lot of those aspects, of your experience because of society and all that jazz. But I will be the first to say, probably not the first, but you know what I mean. I will say that changed my perspective on death. And it's not something that I fear. And it's like, if you really think about it, it makes sense because you just kind of learn to be at peace with it. I mean, you could say that me and death fought for a while and, now we're friends. Maybe not even friends, but just cordial. It's just something that is. And for me personally, it was just a realization that I had that, I don't know when my time is. No one does. I mean, obviously, I hope and pray that I get to, accomplish things and, continue to experience joy and do things that I enjoy. But at the end of the day, for me, I know where I'm going. So I really have no reason to fear anything about it. Now, I will say I still fear the things that can lead to death, pain and things like that. I those are still things that scare me. But death is not one of those things anymore. And if you've ever been in a point in your life where you've reached a level of despair that you just wish you wouldn't wake up, that'll change your perspective. It definitely will. And especially because it wasn't that I was unfamiliar with death before I struggled mentally. I had lost 2 grandparents by that point, I believe. Yeah, I had lost 2 of my grandparents by the time I had been assaulted. So I wasn't unfamiliar with death and grief and all of those things. But it's entirely different when that lens is on you as a person. Because essentially, something else that I realized throughout my healing process and therapy is that I essentially treated myself as if I had died that day. And I mean, it felt like I had, mentally, emotionally, as a person. Being physically violated, it feels like it kills you. And so it was through therapy that I realized I had been treating my experience as if I had died that day and started over, because that was the only way I could cope with what had happened to me. And so realizing this is the lens that I had, death almost becomes trivial. And again, I'm not saying this to be facetious or to be, all deep and philosophical. And no, I'm simply saying this from the perspective of my position, which is, if you have ever experienced a point in your life where you wished you were not living, it is going to change how you view death and everything surrounding it. And so, yeah, I still definitely fear pain and one of all the many things that can lead to death. But death itself, no. I'm at peace with it. It's not something that hangs over my head. And again, I say that because it is a very common fear amongst people. I feel like it's just human nature to fear death and want to avoid death. And I'm also going to say this because, to clarify, death is not something that I actively seek out. Do not ever believe anything that says that at any point. If at some point when I'm gone, something tries to come out about how, no. Death is not something that I actively wish for, seek after, or anything. It's just something that I am at peace with. So, death is weird, but it also just is. And I'm okay with that. Truly, I am.